Chapter 1. Stop living in one mode. Most people wake up every morning assuming they are choosing their thoughts. But the truth no one likes to admit, is that their thoughts have already been chosen for them. Chosen by habit, by emotional default, by yesterday's reactions repeating themselves again today. Not because people are incapable, but because they are operating from a single mental mode, a narrow tunnel through which every decision, every emotion, and every interpretation must pass. This chapter is the moment you break that pattern. Let's start with the principle that sets the entire foundation of this audiobook. If you only think one way, your life can only go one way. It's a rule of human experience. Just as a camera locked to one angle will always capture the same frame, so too will a mind trapped in one perspective repeat the same story. The same fears, the same doubts, the same limits. And yet, people convince themselves they are making new decisions. But those decisions often come from the same mental place: fear, emotion, pride, habit. You might think you're choosing freely, but in reality, you're recycling an old mindset. No one can deny that humans are creatures of habit, but what's often overlooked is how deeply mental habits sculpt identity. When you always think in a defensive mode, you become a defensive person. When you always think in a hopeful mode, you become an optimistic person. But when you only know one mode, you become trapped inside it, even when it no longer serves you. It's the beginning of recognizing that your thinking pattern is not your personality. It's not your destiny. It's simply the mode you've been rehearsing the longest. Think about the innovators the world admires. Think about Steve Jobs. Jobs didn't create breakthroughs because he saw the world through one lens. He shifted constantly. As Walter Isaacson documented in his biography, Jobs moved between extreme idealism and ruthless realism, between artistic intuition and hard engineering logic. He was not one kind of thinker. He was a mental shapeshifter. That capacity, not talent, not luck, but perspective shifting, is what allowed him to build entire industries. Or consider James Cameron. When he filmed Titanic, he wasn't just a director. He became a historian, an engineer, an oceanographer, and a storyteller, adopting each mental position depending on what the film demanded. He famously said, "If you set your goals ridiculously high and fail, you will fail above everyone else's success." But what's often missed is the thinking behind the quote. Cameron didn't rely on one mental mode to execute gigantic visions. He moved between ambition, caution, artistry, and logistical thinking like switching gears in a machine. Then there's Amelia Earhart, a pioneer not because she flew, but because she thought differently. Pilots before her focused purely on technical checklists. Amelia combined caution with curiosity, logic with courage, and planning with improvisation. She once said, "The most effective way to do it is to do it." But behind that simple line was a complex thinking process. She believed in decisive action, yes, but she also ran through multiple mental modes before taking flight. Not only did these individuals use multiple thinking modes, but they also understood, intuitively, what this audiobook is explicitly teaching you. Perspective is a tool, not a fixed personality trait. You don't have to be the emotional type, the logical type, the creative type, or the cautious type. Those labels are prisons. It's great to understand that your emotions, your logic, your creativity, and your caution are all available, on demand, if you train yourself to switch modes deliberately. This is where the 6 hats framework enters your life. The 6 hats are not cute metaphors. They are gears. Mental gears. Just as a cyclist shifts gears to deal with hills, speed, and terrain, so too must you learn to shift your thinking depending on what life throws at you. When you stay in one gear, one mental mode, you burn out quickly or move far too slowly. But when you learn to shift strategically, your entire life transforms. Hard conversations become easier. Decisions become cleaner. Emotions become clearer. Solutions become more visible. If we don't learn these gears, then we risk living a life dictated by the wrong hat at the wrong moment, emotion taking over when logic is needed, pessimism stepping in when creativity is required, caution freezing us when action is essential. Far from being a constraint, the six hats free you. They allow you to say, I don't feel clear right now, let me switch to the white hat. This situation needs optimism, let's wear the yellow hat. This problem demands creativity, time for the green hat. You might think that sounds unnatural, but in reality, you're already switching modes without awareness. The problem is that you're doing it unconsciously, erratically, and reactively. What this audiobook gives you is the ability to do it deliberately. Let's go deeper. Why does living in one mode feel so natural? Because the brain craves efficiency. When a certain emotion or thought pattern work once, maybe in childhood, maybe during a stressful period, the brain memorized it. Just as muscle memory forms through repetition, mental memory forms through constant use. If your default mode is fear, your brain will reach for fear. If it's logic, it will reach for logic. But this efficiency comes at a cost, the loss of adaptability. Adaptability is the real core of human intelligence. The psychologist Jean Piaget famously wrote, "Intelligence is what you use when you don't know what to do." And what he meant was this: intelligence is the ability to shift perspectives until you find the one that works. The world rewards flexible thinkers. Negotiators, pilots, surgeons, entrepreneurs, they all rely on the ability to move between emotional, logical, creative, and critical thinking on command. They don't rely on talent, they rely on mental positioning. This is about more than mental flexibility, it's about identity flexibility. Because when you think differently, you become different. In this audiobook, you'll learn how to shift hats instantly, consciously, and strategically. You'll learn how to align your thinking mode with the moment. And you'll learn how to become the kind of person who doesn't react, you respond. You choose. So let's close this chapter with one truth. Chapter 2. Put on the white hat, remove the fiction, keep the facts. Most of the suffering you experience doesn't come from what's happening. It comes from what you think is happening. The white hat exists to break that link. It strips away stories, distortions, assumptions, fears, and emotional noise, and forces you to deal with reality, not imagination. Whether you like it or not, most people live inside a mental fiction. They feel something, and they decide it must be true. They fear something, and they assume it will happen. They misunderstand something, and they build a whole identity around it. But just as a fog distorts your view of the road, so too does emotional distortion twist your view of the truth. This chapter fixes that. This is the hat of clarity, the hat of objectivity, the hat of mental coldness, not in the sense of being unkind, but in the sense of removing heat so you can see what's actually in front of you. And it's great to understand that clarity is not an attitude, it's a discipline. Let's begin with the role fear plays in distorting reality. Fear doesn't just amplify danger, it rewrites it. It invents details that weren't there. It deletes facts that didn't fit the emotional narrative. If we don't put on the white hat when fear rises, then we risk navigating our lives based on hallucinations. And that is how good people destroy opportunities. That is how talented people stay stuck. That is how smart people make bad decisions. Reinhold Messner, one of the most legendary mountaineers in history, understood this better than anyone. When he climbed Everest without supplemental oxygen, a feat most experts declared impossible, he survived because he separated fact from fear with brutal precision. Messner wrote in The Crystal Horizon, "Fear is a feeling. It is not a fact." That line should be tattooed on your thoughts. He didn't pretend fear wasn't there. He simply refused to let it define the situation. He looked at the ice, the wind, the temperature, the rope conditions, and his own body's signals. Nothing more. Nothing less. Just as Messner had to distinguish fear from the mountain, so too must you learn to distinguish fear from the moment. Emotions can tell you how you feel, but they cannot tell you what is true. And far from being a weakness, separating emotion from fact is a form of mental strength. It means you don't panic when panic appears. It means you stay logical when logic matters most. It means you decide based on what is, not what might be. The white hat demands that from you. But we don't just admire objectivity, we practice it. And that's where the tools come in. If all you do is understand the concept, but not train the discipline, then this chapter becomes philosophy instead of transformation. The first tool is data journaling. This isn't traditional journaling. You're not writing feelings. You're capturing facts. You're documenting what happened, only what happened, without adjectives, assumptions, or predictions. Instead of writing, "I think my boss hates me," you write, "My boss didn't respond to my email yet." Instead of, "Nobody likes me," you write, "Two people didn't reply today." When you practice data journaling, you build the habit of separating the event from the interpretation. And the more you do it, the more you weaken the emotional fog. The second tool is something I call cold light analysis. This comes from executive coach Marshall Goldsmith, who wrote in Triggers, "We don't get better by hoping, we get better by measuring." Cold light analysis asks one question: what does the evidence say when the emotion is removed? You pretend you're advising someone else, someone you don't emotionally identify with. Because just as a surgeon must detach to operate clearly, so too must you detach to evaluate clearly. This mental distancing removes the heat, the drama, the intensity, and replaces it with clarity. The third and most powerful tool is the fact-only reset. You can use it anywhere, during stress, conflict, anxiety, or decision-making. The rule is simple. State the situation using only verifiable facts. No thoughts, no interpretations, no predictions, only observable truth. When your mind spirals, you say out loud, "Stop. Facts only." This interrupts the emotional circuitry and resets your cognition. It is a psychological pattern break. Researchers in cognitive behavioral therapy have shown that naming distortions reduces their power. And the fact-only reset is a fast, practical way to apply that science. Now let's reinforce the bigger truth: facts protect you. In high-risk environments, emotion kills. That's why NASA engineers operate almost entirely in white-hat mode during critical missions. Gene Kranz famously said during Apollo 13, "Let's work the problem, people. Let's not make things worse by guessing." That sentence is the white hat in action. No guessing. Just the problem. Just the facts. Just the next step. Airline pilots do the same thing. When an engine fails, they don't say, "Oh my God, we are doomed." They run the checklist. They go straight to the facts. They follow a predetermined sequence. Why? Because emotional noise causes fatal errors. And the same is true in your life. Not fatal in the literal sense, but fatal in the sense of opportunity, growth, confidence, and clarity. Elite investors use the white hat constantly. Warren Buffett said, "You don't get rewarded for activity. You get rewarded for being right." And what he means is this: emotional reactions don't make money. Facts do. Data does. Clear thinking does. Not only does the white hat protect you from impulsive decisions, but it also helps you identify the truth in a world drowning in opinion. It's great to understand that the white hat is not about being cold or robotic. Far from being a rejection of emotion, it actually protects your emotions by preventing them from running wild. The white hat is the hat that stabilizes your mind. It's the hat that calms you. It's the hat that gives you a clear picture so you can decide intelligently. When you learn to use it, you will notice your anxiety drops. Your reactions slow down. Your decisions sharpen. Your confidence rises, not because the world becomes easier, but because your perception becomes cleaner. Creativity collapses without clarity. Optimism collapses without clarity. Preparedness collapses without clarity. And emotional intelligence collapses without clarity. The white hat is your foundation. Chapter 3. Put on the red hat. Feel it fully, but don't obey it blindly. Emotions are not the enemy. They are signals, raw, immediate, unfiltered signals, and whether you like it or not, they are shaping your choices, your relationships, and your outcomes far more than you realize. But here's the truth most people never hear. Feeling deeply is a strength. Obeying emotions blindly is a disaster. When you put on the red hat, you are not suppressing your inner world or drowning in it. You are learning the art of emotional intelligence as deliberate power. Just as a pilot scans instruments before reacting to turbulence, so too must you scan your emotional instruments before you take action. Because if we don't learn to sit with our emotions, then we risk being controlled by impulses that were never meant to lead. This is about more than feeling better. It's about reclaiming your internal navigation system so your emotions fuel your decisions instead of sabotaging them. Emotional awareness is a form of intelligence and power. Oprah Winfrey built more than a media empire. She built a human-centered movement. But what's often overlooked is that her greatest leverage wasn't strategic, it was emotional. Oprah has repeatedly said, "Feelings are your GPS." She understood that emotion contains data, direction, and meaning. Howard Schultz, former CEO of Starbucks, echoed the same idea. You have to have your heart in your business and your business in your heart. Emotional intelligence is actually a competitive advantage. Emotional awareness is not indulgence, it's discipline. It's the discipline to name what's happening inside you, even when you'd rather look away. Because just as a surgeon can't heal what they refuse to examine, so too you can't solve what you refuse to feel. Emotionally ignorant people are the fragile ones. They explode without warning. They shut down when challenged. They crumble under pressure because they've never learned to manage the storm inside. Ignored emotions don't disappear, they detonate. And the people who master the red hat? They are stable, steady, and centered because they know what their internal signals mean. The danger of emotional suppression. Let's be honest, most people were taught that emotions should be managed by pretending they don't exist. But suppressing emotions doesn't diminish their power, it actually magnifies it. The more you push a feeling down, the more velocity it gains, like steam building inside a sealed container. You might think that suppression equals strength. But in reality, suppression equals instability. The Journal of Personality and Social Psychology published a landmark finding. Suppressing emotions increases physical stress, weakens memory, and leads to irrational decision-making. In other words, suppression is the mental equivalent of covering your eyes while driving. Whether you like it or not, your feelings already influence you. They are already shaping your words, your tone, your interpretations, your conclusions. The only question is whether you will face them or be controlled by them. Just as ignoring a warning light on your dashboard doesn't fix the problem, so too ignoring emotional discomfort doesn't resolve it. It delays it. It distorts it. It eventually demands your attention in far more destructive ways. This is about more than mental health. It's about leadership of the self. The red hat is not about reacting. It's about perceiving. The red hat teaches you to pause and feel fully without obeying blindly. It gives you the structure to observe emotion without fusing with it. A thought is not a command. A feeling is not a law. An impulse is not a prophecy. The red hat says, "Let me tell you what I feel," and let me decide what to do about it. Not only does this free you from reactivity, but it also unlocks emotional clarity, emotional intelligence, and emotional stability. When you understand the emotion, you can use the emotion. When you understand the source, you can change the outcome. This is where the real power begins. The free Red Hat tools that change everything. 1. The 90-second rule. Dr. Jill Bolte-Taylor. Neuroanatomist Jill Bolte-Taylor discovered something astonishing. The physiological lifespan of emotion in the body is only 90 seconds. After that, any continuation is mental reinjection, meaning it's your story, your interpretation, your replaying of the event that keeps the emotion alive. Here's how to apply it. When a strong emotion hits, sit with it for 90 seconds. Feel it. Observe it. Let it run its natural course without feeding it with thoughts. Just as a wave rises and falls, so too emotions crest and recede, unless you chase them. The 90-second rule creates space between the feeling and the reaction, giving you clarity instead of chaos. 2. Name it before you frame it. This tool is simple but transformative. Before you take action, identify the exact emotion. Not the story. Not the judgment. The emotion itself. Psychologist Dan Siegel calls this name it to tame it, because the act of naming reduces limbic reactivity. Saying I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling rejected, shifts the experience from raw chaos to structured awareness. Just as labeling a threat helps a soldier respond intelligently, so too labeling your emotions helps you respond strategically. 3. Emotion is information, not instruction. Here is the core philosophy of the Red Hat. Feelings are data, not directives. Anger tells you a boundary was crossed. Fear tells you there is risk. Sadness tells you something mattered. Envy tells you what you want. Joy tells you what aligns with your identity. Emotion is information. Action is your choice. If we don't separate the two, then we risk reacting blindly to signals that were meant for understanding, not obedience. This model is used by elite negotiators, high-level CEOs, and elite athletes who must stay centered under pressure. They don't ignore their emotions, they interpret them. Emotional calibration is the difference between chaos and clarity. You are not trying to get rid of your emotions, you are trying to calibrate them. Just as a sound engineer adjusts levels to create harmony, so too must you adjust your emotional levels to create clarity. Ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to tell me? What triggered it? Is it accurate? Is it useful? What action makes sense after understanding it? This is emotional maturity in action. Chapter 4. Put on the black hat. Prepare for what can break you. We live in a world full of promises, hopes, dreams, and danger lurking behind optimism. Most self-help talks about going big, chasing your dreams, embracing possibility. But few warn you about what you risk when you don't prepare. The black hat exists precisely for that reason, to force you to anticipate what can go wrong, to plan for it, and to move forward anyway. Because whether you like it or not, reality will test your plans. And in that test, optimism without strategy is reckless. That's why the black hat isn't pessimism. It's not negativity. It's strategic realism. Just as a professional boxer knows he might be hit before he hits first, so too must you expect failure before success. If you only ever dream, you might build a castle in the clouds. But without a foundation, that castle collapses under pressure. Elite operators don't rely on luck. They rely on anticipation, rehearsal, contingency. That's the mindset of elite military units, Navy SEALs, Special Forces, survival teams, but it's also the mindset behind championship racing mechanics, elite entrepreneurs, and high-stakes innovators. When you examine the track record of elite performance, you notice a pattern. They never assume smooth sailing. They assume turbulence. They expect error. They build systems to catch disasters before they happen. That is the power of the black hat. The black hat is the mind of strategists. It's the gear that shifts you out of blind hope, out of guesswork, out of naive risk, and into controlled, measured forward motion. Not only does this guard you against failure, but it also sharpens your awareness. It helps you see weak points, hidden threats, unspoken assumptions before they become crises. Being prepared doesn't require paranoia. It requires structure, a framework, a dedicated risk audit. Here's how you run one, step by step. 1. Worst-case mapping. Start with the worst possible outcome of your plan. What's the absolute worst that could happen if everything goes wrong? Think big. Think brutal. Financial collapse. Reputation damage. Emotional burnout. Whatever applies to your scenario. Document it. Write it down. Visualize it. Once you have the worst case in mind, work backward. What triggers that worst case? What small decision, what neglected detail, what assumption could lead there? Just as a general plans for retreat while preparing for offense, you plan for collapse while building for success. This dual approach gives you mental balance. It helps you hold ambition and realism together. It helps you take risks, calculated risks, rather than blind leaps. 2. Failure rehearsals, if-then contingencies. Once you map the risk, run a what-if rehearsal. Ask, if this happens, then what will I do? Create contingency plans. Write them down. Practice them mentally. For example, if the deal falls through, then I have plan B ready. If the market crashes, then I preserve cash and wait. In life, just like in elite operations, rehearsed contingency turns chaos into a reroute, not a collapse. Elite race engineers do this. They simulate engine failures before a race, practice pit stop emergencies, calculate failure variables long before the flag drops. Their readiness keeps drivers alive. Similarly, your readiness keeps your ambitions alive. 3. Fragility analysis. This is borrowed from business strategist thinking. Identify which parts of your plan, project, or life are fragile, meaning they rely on unstable external conditions or assumptions. What part of your success depends on others, on luck, on timing, or on emotions? Which part can collapse with one shock? Which part has no backup? Mark those parts. Then reinforce them, diversify them, or build redundancy. Just as buildings in earthquake zones are built with shock absorbers and backup supports, you build your life with structural redundancies. Financial buffer, emotional support, multiple skill sets, diverse options. Because black hat mindset in action. Think about Jeff Bezos. When he founded Amazon, he didn't build for fast growth only. He built infrastructure. He built logistics. He built systems to handle explosive scale long before any of it existed. He ran fragility analysis. He anticipated demand surges, operational bottlenecks, supply chain breakdowns. He prepared for chaos. That's the black hat. That's the difference between a flash-in-the-pan startup and a global empire. Or consider Elon Musk. When he launched rockets at SpaceX, he didn't treat the mission as a hopeful launch. He simulated failures. He ran contingency tests. He assumed rockets will fail first. Then he prepared. He prepared until failure ceased to be an option by improving design, redundancy, planning. That is strategic pessimism turned into unstoppable progress. That is the black hat in action. Overcoming resistance to the black hat. Not only does the black hat help avoid disaster, but it also protects your emotional energy, your financial health, your reputation, your relationships. It gives you calm under pressure. It gives you control when chaos erupts. It converts fear into preparation. It converts uncertainty into strategy. Your Black Hat Action Plan. Here is what you need to do right now. Write down your biggest active goal: business, relationship, health, creative. Run a worst-case map. What's the worst outcome if everything goes wrong? Write it. Go deep. Identify triggers and weak points. What assumptions, vulnerabilities support this goal? Write them. Define if, then contingencies. For each weak point, create a backup plan. For example, if income drops below X, I cut expenses and activate Plan B. Build redundancy. Add backup resources, buffer zones, safety margins. Diversify your income, skills, or support system. Rehearse mentally. Visualize failure, then the recovery. Simulate the crisis mentally, then simulate your composed response. If you do this once, you build awareness. If you do it regularly, every few months, before major decisions, you build resilience. Why the Black Hat is integral to your new identity. You are building more than habits. You are building an identity capable of greatness and survival. The Black Hat ensures your identity is rugged, adaptable, stable. Not just hopeful and idealistic. Because hope without structure is fragile. Ambition without contingency is reckless. Dreams without foundation are illusions. Chapter 5. Put on the yellow hat. Build the future. Don't wait for it. There comes a moment in every transformation when looking at danger is not enough. After the Black Hat, you know what can break you. But knowing what can go wrong is only half the game. At some point, you must also look at what can go right. You must build the future you want, not wait for it to arrive. That's the yellow hat. And whether you like it or not, the future is always being built by someone. Either you shape it with intention, or someone else shapes it for you. This is where visionary optimism enters the picture, but not the fluffy kind, not the pop psychology cliches that tell you to just believe. As the phrase in this chapter states clearly, hope is useless without a blueprint. The yellow hat is disciplined optimism, optimism with engineering behind it, optimism with strategy, optimism that builds while it dreams. Just as architects don't simply imagine a skyscraper but draft blueprints and structural plans, so too must you take your visions and convert them into frameworks, steps, and systems. Strategic optimism is one of the most practical mental models you will ever use. It drives innovation. It fuels resilience. It creates possibilities others cannot see. Visionary optimism. Think about Walt Disney. Before Mickey Mouse, before theme parks, before the global empire, he stared at empty fields and saw entire worlds. He once said, "It's kind of fun to do the impossible." He invested in ideas nobody believed in because his optimism wasn't blind, it was calculated. He knew imagination alone wasn't enough. He paid it with discipline, planning, and relentless execution. Or consider Richard Branson. He didn't enter industries because they were easy. He entered them because he saw opportunity where others saw risk. Airline. He did it. Space tourism. He did it. Music. Telecommunications. He did it. He leveraged optimism as a competitive advantage. He saw the upside others ignored, not because he was naive, but because he trained himself to spot opportunity the way a tracker spots footprints, with precision. Just as you choose the white hat for clarity and the red hat for emotion, you choose the yellow hat to unlock potential. When you use it intentionally, it becomes a habit of looking at life through the lens of possibility, not limitation. Disciplined optimism. The yellow hat is not about predicting the future. It's about creating it. And you create it through disciplined optimism, a repeatable framework anyone can use. 1. Opportunity spotting. Opportunity is rarely obvious. In fact, most opportunities hide inside problems. The optimistic mind scans for openings others miss. When something goes wrong, you ask, where's the advantage? What benefit hides behind this difficulty? What could this become if reinterpreted? Just as a gold miner digs through dirt to find precious metal, so too must you sift through adversity for opportunity. This simple shift turns frustration into fuel. When others retreat, you advance. 2. Upside framing. Upside framing is the art of looking at benefits, not just threats. If the black hat asks, what could destroy this? The yellow hat asks, what could this become if it works? This isn't fantasy. This is balanced thinking. One protects you, the other pulls you forward. Without upside framing, you become defensive. With it, you become expansive. Many leaders use this technique. Athletes envision victory. Entrepreneurs envision scale. Inventors envision transformation. Upside framing keeps motivation alive. It keeps creativity flowing. And it gives your future direction instead of drifting. 3. Designing small wins. Optimism becomes sustainable when it has proof. Small wins are that proof. They build momentum. They fuel confidence. They make large goals feel achievable. Atomic Habits by James Clear describes this phenomenon perfectly. Success compounds when behavior is reinforced by visible progress. If you don't engineer small wins, then you risk losing motivation prematurely. Most people quit not because they lack ability, but because they lack evidence that they are advancing. Strategic optimism versus fake positivity. Let's be clear, the yellow hat is not a license to ignore problems. Fake positivity denies reality. It says, everything's fine, while your foundation cracks. It says, just stay positive, while your plan collapses from poor preparation. Far from being empowering, fake positivity is dangerous. It blinds you. It sedates you. It disconnects you from reality. Strategic optimism is the opposite. It sees everything, the risks, the flaws, the weaknesses, but chooses to lean into potential anyway. Just as a pilot must monitor both altitude and fuel, so too must you monitor both ambition and risk. The black hat protects the mission. The yellow hat propels the mission. Together, they create balanced judgment. How to use the yellow hat daily. Here's how you activate disciplined optimism in your actual life. 1. Morning opportunity scan. Ask, what potential upside exists today that I can act on? Train your brain to start with opportunity, not obstacle. 2. The upside question for every challenge. Whenever something goes wrong, immediately ask, what is the hidden opportunity here? What can this teach me? What new direction does this open? 3. Create a proof log of small wins. Document wins, even tiny ones. These reinforce progress. They create momentum. They make you optimistic through evidence, not imagination. 4. Weekly vision refinement. Update your plans, goals, and direction weekly. Optimism without iteration becomes fantasy. When you refine every week, your future stays alive. 5. Deliberately imagine best-case scenarios. Not as daydreams, but as prototypes. Ask, if everything worked, what would this look like? And what steps make that outcome more likely? These behaviors anchor your optimism into reality. They make possibility a habit, not a rare emotional spike. Why you need the yellow hat for your new identity. The future version of you, the one you're building throughout this audiobook, cannot survive on caution alone. You mastered clarity. You mastered emotion. You mastered risk. Now you must master vision. With the yellow hat, your transformation accelerates. Your mind shifts from survival to opportunity, from managing risk to creating reward. You stop waiting and you start building. Chapter 6. Put on the green hat. Create what doesn't exist yet. Creativity is not a luxury. It is not decoration. It is not something artistic people get to enjoy on weekends. Creativity is a survival tool. Creativity is adaptation. Creativity is evolution in real time. Just as species die when they fail to adapt, so too do people who refuse to innovate stagnate long before their bodies stop breathing. The green hat is where you break the script. This hat represents possibility. It represents options where fear once hid them. It represents the deliberate act of generating what isn't yet real. Nikola Tesla once said, "The mind is sharper and keener in seclusion and uninterrupted solitude." Tesla understood that creativity is not magic, it is construction. Leonardo da Vinci understood the same truth, noting that art is never finished, only abandoned. Modern creators, from Pixar directors to MIT innovators, know this. Creativity is not a lightning strike. It is a process, a discipline, a repeated action that builds internal capability. Creativity is a muscle, not a miracle. You might think creativity belongs to gifted geniuses, but in reality, every genius was a worker long before they were an icon. Tesla created thousands of sketches before revealing a single breakthrough. Da Vinci filled over 13,000 pages of notebooks not because he was bored, but because he understood that ideas grow through repetition. Not only is creativity deliberate, but it is also cumulative. Every attempt lays the groundwork for the next. If we don't train this muscle, then we risk becoming rigid, locked in patterns that no longer serve us. Look at Pixar's story teams. According to creativity researcher Ed Catmull, Pixar requires at least 3 different versions of every major idea before it is allowed to move forward. 3 drafts. 3 angles. 3 possibilities. This is creativity as process, not whim. As Catmull wrote in Creativity Incorporated, early ideas are ugly. That's the point. The green hat isn't about perfection, it's about permission. Permission to generate. Permission to imagine. Permission to explore. When life gets tight, creativity breaks the lock. Pressure doesn't kill creativity. Stagnation does. When life gets tight, creativity breaks the lock. This is the green hat in action. When circumstances feel rigid, the green hat is the force that bends the bars. When your choices are limited, the green hat creates new ones. Just as mountaineers use creative problem-solving to navigate sudden storms, so too must you use creativity to navigate psychological tightness. No one can deny that fear closes the mind, but what's often overlooked is that creativity reopens it. Creativity unlocks cognitive flexibility. Creativity expands your emotional range. Creativity gives you space where stress tries to shrink you. Creative triggers you can use daily. To put on the green hat is to activate creativity deliberately. Here are the tools. 1. The divergent thinking drill. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Choose one problem. Generate 20 ideas. They don't need to be good. They just need to be expressed. Divergent thinking is the act of broadening the field before narrowing it. This drill trains your brain to move, not stall. Just as athletes warm up to avoid injury, so too must creators warm up to avoid mental stagnation. 2. The constraint-breaking method. Take any rule you've accepted, any limit, any assumption, any that's just how things are, and ask, what if the opposite were true? This technique mirrors Da Vinci's habit of questioning the obvious. Far from being rebellious for the sake of rebellion, it actually exposes new pathways that were blocked by habitual thinking. For example, I can't start a business because I don't have capital. Flip it, what if starting without capital is an advantage? Immediately, new strategies appear: pre-selling, bootstrapping, partnerships, digital products. 3. The what-if cascade. This tool turns one idea into 20. You begin with a single what-if question, then create a chain reaction. What if I change the environment? What if I change the assumptions? What if I change the audience? What if I change the timeline? What if I change the rules? Just as water finds cracks in a stone wall, so too does the what-if cascade find creative openings where none seem possible. 4. The 3-idea rule, Pixar method. Every solution must come with 3 variations. Not because you need all 3, but because you must refuse the mental laziness of stopping at the first idea. This practice develops creative stamina. It forces your mind to continue generating even after the first spark. Innovation is protection. Creativity is not just expression, it's protection. Innovators survive uncertainty because they refuse to be trapped inside old frameworks. Elon Musk reimagined rockets by ignoring aerospace conventions. The Wright brothers used bicycle mechanics to solve aviation problems. Netflix abandoned DVDs before streaming had proven profitable. The green hat isn't naive. It is strategic. It anticipates the future instead of reacting to it. You might say, but I'm not building rockets or billion-dollar companies. That doesn't matter. Creativity is useful at every level. How you solve relationship problems. How you navigate career obstacles. How you break personal habits. Creativity helps you outperform your circumstances. Just as the black hat protects you from disaster, so too does the green hat offer escape routes you haven't yet imagined. Behavioral instructions, building your creative life. Here is your daily practice. 15 minutes of idea generation. Pick any topic. Generate 10 ideas. This builds the muscle. Weekly constraint break. Identify one assumption you've accepted. Flip it. Explore the reverse. Monthly creative project. Small, simple, and limited. A redesign. A new routine. A prototype. Movement matters more than scale. Environment rotation. Tesla walked to think. Da Vinci explored landscapes. Change your environment weekly. New surroundings, new connections. Chapter 7. Put on the blue hat. Become the commander of your mind. By now, you have traveled through 6 mental landscapes. You've stopped living in one mode, assessed facts, processed emotions, prepared for failure, built optimism, and generated creative possibilities. Each of these hats serves a distinct function, but without orchestration, they remain isolated tools. The blue hat is the command tower. It is the conductor, the general, the air traffic controller of your mind. Far from being passive, it actively directs thinking, ensuring that your mental processes are aligned with your goals. Just as an orchestra without a conductor produces noise, so too does a mind without the blue hat produce fragmented, uncoordinated thoughts. The blue hat says, the mind works for you, not the other way around. It doesn't react, it commands. It doesn't wonder, it sequences. It doesn't collapse under chaos, it organizes. The blue hat integrates all of it, turning potential into performance. The blue hat as your control tower. Elite decision-makers rely on this kind of meta-thinking. Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates, is famous for his radical reflection system. Dalio doesn't just analyze financial markets, he analyzes his own thinking. He asks, was I biased? Did I allow emotion to override fact? Did I miss alternative perspectives? His daily habit of reviewing decisions ensures that his mind grows stronger with every choice. Just as a general reviews after-action reports following a mission, the blue hat allows you to step back from your own cognition and identify weaknesses, blind spots, and opportunities for improvement. This is strategic meta-thinking, a skill elite leaders, military strategists, and emergency coordinators rely on to survive and thrive under pressure. How to use the blue hat. The blue hat is not just awareness, it is action. It introduces mental switching protocols, techniques to control your thinking and maintain clarity. 1. Hat rotation. Just as air traffic controllers switch focus between planes in different airspaces, you must rotate your hats deliberately. Begin with a problem. White hat, gather facts. Red hat, notice emotional reactions. Black hat, assess risks. Yellow hat, look for opportunities. Green hat, generate possibilities. Blue hat, review, coordinate, sequence. This rotation ensures that you are using the right mental tool at the right time. If you fail to rotate, then your thinking remains reactive and incomplete. 2. Micro-pauses. Decision fatigue is real. Whether in business, creative work, or personal challenges, continuous thinking leads to errors. The blue hat introduces micro-pauses, short breaks of deliberate reflection. Ask yourself, what hat am I in? What hat should I shift to next? Am I stuck or over-focused? This habit strengthens mental agility, letting you act with precision instead of reflex. 3. Decision sequencing. The blue hat sets the order of operations. When facing a complex problem, it dictates, first gather facts, then assess risk, then explore opportunities. Just as emergency leaders follow precise checklists during crises, you sequence your mental operations to prevent chaos and ensure comprehensive thinking. The result: clarity under pressure, precision under ambiguity. Meta-thinking in action. Ray Dalio isn't alone. Military after-action reviews, ours, are essentially blue hat protocols in practice. Soldiers conduct structured reflections immediately after missions, asking, what went right? What went wrong? How could we improve? The blue hat is this process applied to your personal cognition. In business, strategists like Jeff Bezos use regret minimization frameworks. Before major decisions, Bezos mentally projects himself into the future and asks, will I regret not doing this? This is the blue hat controlling emotion, opportunity, and risk simultaneously, aligning all cognitive resources toward a single coherent judgment. The blue hat in daily practice. How do you put this into action? Starting today. Daily cognitive review. At the end of each day, reflect on 3 questions. Which hat did I overuse? Which hat did I neglect? How did my thinking influence outcomes? Documenting this trains your metacognition. Pre-decision sequence. Before a major choice, explicitly name the hat sequence you will use: white, reds, black, yellow, green, blue. Treat it like a protocol, a checklist. It ensures that your decisions are systematic, not impulsive. Micropause trigger. Set up micropause triggers throughout your day when you feel stress, confusion, or frustration. During these triggers, ask, am I in the right hat? Should I shift perspective before acting? These pauses are mental reset buttons, reinforcing executive control. Weekly hat reflection. Once a week, conduct a structured reflection. What insights did each hat generate? Were any perspectives ignored? Did I integrate all inputs before acting? This habit turns the blue hat into a constant internal coach, keeping your cognitive system aligned, adaptive, and efficient. The blue hat is not optional. All the other hats, white, red, black, yellow, green, are tools. But tools without a master remain scattered and weak. Just as a pilot relies on air traffic control to coordinate dozens of aircraft safely, so too does your mind rely on the blue hat to coordinate your thinking safely and productively. You might think that you can simply think smarter without this level of orchestration, but in reality, unstructured thinking leads to errors, biases, and wasted effort. When the blue hat commands, every mental action is purposeful. Every emotion is acknowledged, every risk calculated, and every creative possibility considered. This system produces measurable performance improvements in life, business, and personal growth. Final instructions. Begin each decision-making session by declaring the hat rotation sequence. During stressful situations, consciously apply a micro-pause to reassess hat alignment. Conduct daily and weekly reflections to monitor hat usage, meta-think biases, and mental efficiency. Treat the blue hat as the overarching system. It doesn't generate content itself but ensures that every other hat contributes to your intended outcome. Not only does this enhance productivity, but it also builds mental resilience, turning confusion into clarity, emotion into data, risk into preparation, hope into action, and creativity into innovation.